Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this quick tutorial and breakdown where I'm going to show you exactly how to color match footage shot in Sony S-Log3 with the ARRI Alexa 35 Log C4 footage. And this is really the gold standard of cinema cameras. Everyone loves the Alexa 35 for a reason. It has some of the best color out there. Just taking a look at this image right off the bat, you can see how natural it feels as far as the contrast ratios, the color balance, skin tones, shadow and highlight detail. Everything is looking amazing right off the bat with no additional corrections or stylization. So this could practically be a final image right here, and it's the perfect baseline for us to ultimately match our S-Log3 footage to. And I also want to mention before we jump in that although I'm demoing this in DaVinci Resolve, all of these principles can apply whether you're in Final Cut Pro, Premiere Pro, or any other platform for that matter. I'm intentionally using a very limited set of tools to make these corrections to show you how simply and easily you can transform your footage and make it a lot more Alexa-like. There are, of course, some additional features and tools within DaVinci Resolve that allow you to get more granular and that much closer to the Alexa look, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But for now, let's start by looking at this S-Log3 shot. This was captured under identical lighting. We used as many of the same settings as possible to minimize variables as far as our exposure was concerned, white balance, and other camera settings. So this is as close as we could get to a match, but you're going to see just how different it looks when I apply this S-Log3 to Rec. 709 LUT. Let's just look at that at full screen, and that is a completely different image than we got from the Alexa 35, even with almost identical camera settings. And I'll actually just bring up the Alexa 35 footage here so we can swipe between them and look just how different these images are. As we saw before, the Alexa footage looks almost finished right off the bat, and the Sony footage has that video look that so many filmmakers complain about and want to fight against. But the good news is, one thing I've learned after grading so many shots in S-Log3 is that it's actually a really good picture profile. It just kind of gets a bad rap because the natural S-Log3 conversion that is bundled with a lot of software or that Sony offers just doesn't look great and ultimately renders the image looking more video-like, even though it contains so much color and information and it's capable of so much more. You just have to understand how to unlock those colors and create a denser, more filmic image with some of these principles that we're going to be going through today. So the first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to turn this reference image off, and we're going to adjust the most obvious problem area, which is our contrast curve. This is nowhere near the contrast curve of the Alexa 35 footage, and that's a huge part of the reason why it doesn't match. So I'm going to do this only using our lift, gamma, and gain settings, again, just to show you that you can use the most simple tools to achieve these results. And I'm going to start here with the gain because I want to keep an eye here on these bright areas, the light and the detail in her hair. Going to turn this all the way down to 50, let's say 0.56. This is what I found in Resolve, so that might be 56% depending on the software that you're using. And you could see all of the detail was retained. The blown out areas here in her hair, the light, her shoulder. If we just do a quick before and after of that, you can see just how much detail we are able to recover. And we've actually brought it a little bit lower than it needs to be because we're next going to bump up the midtones to compensate for this exposure loss. And we want some extra headroom on those highlights so they don't get so blown out. So next we're going to go to the gamma setting or your midtone adjustment, and we're just going to turn up the exposure to a setting on here of 0.32, or you could go up by roughly 32%. So obviously it's making the image at this stage look worse, but it needs to kind of look worse before it gets better. And just look at kind of what we've done here so far is we've retained a lot of the highlight detail, but we've brought back the mids, and now the shadows are obviously looking terrible, which is why the image looks the way that it does. But if we drop this down to 0.14, now we have a much more balanced and natural image. So I'm just going to very quickly for you toggle on and off. This is a standard Rec. 709 conversion for S-Log3. And this is our version with the retained highlight detail and the more natural shadow levels, and just overall denser image now that we've created. We've also now reintroduced more saturation just as a byproduct of making those exposure adjustments. So compared to the Alexa 35 footage, it's now looking actually surprisingly that much closer. There's obviously a lot of differences still in terms of saturation and color balance, but just that exposure adjustment alone makes it feel like it's in the same world as the Alexa footage. The way that the main focal points of the image, namely her face, her skin tones are sitting, feels a lot more Alexa-like than if we go back just to the standard base conversion and compare that with the Alexa 35, which is, that much more different. So let's go back to our now second step here where we left off. And the next thing I want to do is adjust the saturation, because there's definitely going to be some color balancing to be done, but it's also desaturated. So adding in a touch of saturation is just going to help us see the problem more obviously. So I'm going to go to the saturation setting, and I'm just going to turn it up to 57 here in DaVinci Resolve. So you can go up anywhere from 3 to 7%, let's say, in your software, depending on what you're using. And let's now wipe this image again back and forth. And again, we're getting much closer now. Color balance is off, but saturation levels are feeling much better. So that's the next thing we're going to do here, is just adjust our color balance. And the first thing that I'll do, and this is kind of a universal step that I recommend doing, some of the other steps we're going to go through, you're going to have to push and pull a little bit by eye and using your scopes if you'd like. But I'm going to go down to take the tint to about -3, and that's just going to neutralize the image that much more. The Alexa 35 has a much kind of greener overall palette, and the S-Log3 footage always tends to skew more magenta. So that helps kind of knock out that overall issue, but that doesn't solve some of the other problems. So this is where I'm going to make an overall recommendation to those of you who are not using DaVinci Resolve, and that is you're never going to be able to push and pull your way to the exact same color balance as you're finding with the Alexa footage, just with the lift gamma gain wheels. I'll show you what's going to happen if we try, and it's going to get us most of the way there, but it's not going to get us the full way there, just because the nature of the images needs more nuance to get that perfect of a match. But let's just take a look here. So take our highlights as a starting point. So these are feeling pretty close, but a little bit too magenta still on the S-Log footage. So we're going to just kind of neutralize that, push a little bit of green in there, warm it up just a touch. That's going to require us to cool down some of her skin tones and shadow areas, so we can push that a little bit cooler. And that's going to start getting us into more of that Alexa-like territory. And I might actually boost up the saturation in this case to closer to 60. And right there, these are a much better match. So this is not going to be our final look that we're going to assess today, but this is pretty close for just a few steps. We really just brought this into Rec 709, retained some detail on the highlights, brought the shadow and mid-tone levels into more filmic territory, added back in some contrast, and then just did some very basic color adjustments, nothing huge. If you look at the color wheels, these things have actually barely moved, and that's what you want. You don't want to push so much information into the file that it starts to fall apart or looks synthetic or over stylized. So let's compare that now to our Rec 709 base grade. I'm going to turn that on and off, and you can see just how far we've come. Even just this right here, I would be so much happier with using as kind of a base correction compared to what normally you're working with, which looks like this. So you can already see there's just so much more potential with S-Log profile than initially meets the eye. So the next thing I want to talk about here are just some of these more advanced tools that will let you get a little bit more granular. And I'll show you kind of very quickly here using, again, the Alexa 35 as a reference. If we were to look at these images, overall, they're looking pretty close, but there's just certain areas like the skin tones that are still too different. So the tool that we're going to want to use in this case is the Color Warper tool. So once you click in there, all you have to do is select a point on the image. So we're going to just select kind of a mid-range of her skin tones, and then we're going to take the chroma range and bring that up to about 0.08. And that's going to allow us to just push this around and very quickly, in literally just a second, match the skin tones much more closely. So let's pull over our image wipe and we could see that these skin tones are much closer match. And we could do the same thing for other color tones in this shot, and really just using that color warper tool and just kind of selecting parts of the image, we're able to get it into that Alexa territory. So now that the skin tones are matching, really all I'm going to do is maybe boost the saturation a touch more again, just as we make these micro adjustments. Sometimes you want to push and pull these different levels. Everything really interacts. When you change one variable, it affects something else. So you want to keep an eye on those different things. And I'll probably pull it a little bit more green, maybe just another point or two here, just to get us closer. And again, this is pretty solid for just a few steps. So really the biggest challenge for S-Log3 filmmakers isn't the capability of the profile itself. As we could see here, you could just really do so much with it, and it's a very powerful format. But it's a matter of most of the time you don't have footage like this to match. You're not going to have Alexa 35 footage as a baseline to figure out what would it have looked like if I shot on Alexa 35. And that's ultimately why I created, for my own purpose more than anything else, this S-Log3 Cinespace LUT. And I'll show you just kind of the difference here. So this is our footage that we were just working with a moment ago. And if we look at that compared to the ARRI Alexa footage, it's pretty close, but again, it's still not quite there because really there's that much more pushing and pulling of these micro adjustments to all these different hues and selective saturation and all these different things that we need to do to kind of get it looking exactly like this. So the Cinespace LUT, which I'm going to show you now, essentially went through that sequence over and over and over on a ton of test footage to get the most Alexa-like colors with those very granular adjustments. And this is the result. I'm going to apply the grade here and let's go full screen. So this is the Cinespace LUT, and this is what we had before with all those adjustments, making it look so much more Alexa-like. We're still getting way closer here with the Cinespace LUT. And let's take a look at the Alexa 35 again here as a reference. So Alexa 35, Cinespace, it's a near perfect match on this particular shot and would be on virtually any S-Log3 shot. And we can compare that to what we had just a moment ago. I'm going to kind of revert to the previous version, which now looks even that much more different. It, again, is much closer than our Rec 709 base, which we can look at here. A huge improvement against that, but not quite as close as the Cinespace, which just brings a lot more of that kind of deeper green blue detail into the shadows, but selectively rolls off the saturation in the shadows, gets the skin tones looking very Alexa-like, maintains all of that detail in the highlights, increases overall image density and weight, and gives us that much more filmic image. So if you're looking for a LUT that can do this, you can always pick up the Cinespace LUT at cinecolor.io. We've had a ton of really great feedback on this one in particular. And like I said, it's been tested on so many shots. So I think it's really going to benefit your workflow. But even if you decide to do all of this manually, I think the most important takeaway is that S-Log3 footage can and will deliver amazing results. You just have to know how to handle it best in post. It's worth taking the time to set up your own workflow, whether it's LUT-based or a custom solution, to get those results and not have to worry about struggling with S-Log3 ever again. If you enjoyed this demo, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, and I'll be sharing a lot more on S-Log3 and other color tutorials soon, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys next time.